And joining me now for his first appearance on Meet the Press is the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. Mr. Secretary, welcome to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you so much, Chuck. It's good to be with you.
Let me start with the news of the week. President Trump said the Russia thing was on his mind when he fired FBI Director James Comey. He has called the Russia investigation fake news, a witch hunt. Is this Russia investigation in your mind, considering the dealings you have around the world? Do you believe this is a witch hunt, fake news? Is the president correct?
Well, Chuck, the president, I think, has made it clear that he feels it's important that we re-engage with Russia. The relationship with Russia, as he has described and I've described as well, is, I think, at an all-time low point since the end of the Cold War, with a very low level of trust. I think the world, and it's in the interest of the American people, it's in the interest of Russia, the rest of the world, that we do something to see if we cannot improve the relationship between the two greatest nuclear powers in the world. So the president, I think, is committed to at least make an effort in that regard, and he has certainly asked me to make an important effort as well.
I understand that, but you look at what's happened in these Western European nations, in France, in the UK, in Germany, Italy, accusations of Russian interference in their democratic process. What message does it send to those countries that their number one ally, the United States, the president fired the man at the agency that was looking in to the very problem they're dealing with, Russian interference in the democracy?
Well, Chuck, what I hear from the leaders of the other nations, Europe and more broadly, and the subject of Russia comes up in all of our conversations, is all of the other nations want the U.S. and Russia to work towards improving our relationship as well. For all the reasons that I just mentioned, I think it's largely viewed that it is not healthy for the world. It's certainly not healthy for us, for the American people, our national security interest, and otherwise, for this relationship to remain at this low level. Whether we can improve it or not remains to be seen. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of hard work. But I think the president's committed, rightly so, and I'm committed with him as well, to see if we cannot do something to put us on a better footing in our relationship with Russia.
Can you get on a better footing with him if you don't address this issue of the Russian interference? I mean, your counterpart, the Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Lavrov, said that you guys didn't even talk about this issue of Russian interference in our election because, as he put it, the President Trump himself says it's fake news, so it's not an issue. Why haven't you brought it up with them?
Well, Chuck, I think we have such a broad range of important issues that have to be addressed in the U.S.-Russia relationship. Obviously, the interference in the election is one of those. I think it's been well documented. It's pretty well understood, the nature of that interference here and elsewhere. And, you know, these are not new tactics on the part of the Russian government, directed not only at us but at others. But again, I think we have to look at this relationship in its broadest contours, and there are many, many important areas which require our attention if we are to bring it back to a relationship that we believe is necessary for the security of the U.S.
Mr. Secretary, though, this is fundamental. They interfered with our democracy. I just don't understand how this is not a top issue for you to deal with them in order to essentially start with a clean slate. Can't start with a clean slate until maybe they either own up to what they did or we punish them in a way that they're not going to do this again.
Well, Chuck, I think it's important to understand we're not trying to start with a clean slate. I think terms like having a reset are overused. You cannot reset, you cannot erase the past, you cannot start with a clean slate, and we're not trying to start with a clean slate. We're starting with the slate we have and all the problems that are on that slate. We don't dismiss any of them. We don't give anyone a free pass on any of them. They're part of the entire nature of the discussion we're having with the Russians. And yes, there are a large number of issues that we have to get around to addressing in order to put this relationship back together, if that is indeed possible.
During your confirmation hearings, you made clear you didn't have, obviously you hadn't been briefed on the intelligence reports, the 17 different agencies that came to the conclusions that the Russians did make an effort to interfere in this election. Obviously, there's an investigation going along to see if there was any collusion in this interference. Since you become Secretary of State in February, have you been briefed? Have you seen this intelligence now? Is it clear in your mind that it is a fact the Russians interfered in our elections?
I have seen the intelligence reports, Chuck, And yes, I don't think there's any question that the Russians were playing around in our electoral processes. Again, as those intelligence reports also have indicated, it's inconclusive as to what, if any, effect it had.
I understand about the impact, but the fact that they got into it, what should the repercussions be now in your mind?
Well, they're just part of that broader landscape of conversations, Chuck. And I think, the real impact is it serves yet again to undermine the trust between the United States and Russia. And as I have said, and the President has said, we're just at a very, very low level of trust between our two countries right now. And so what we're exploring is how do we begin the process of restoring that trust? And ultimately, it will touch on all of these issues.
During the meeting in the Oval Office with the foreign minister and the president, in the readout, Ambassador Kislyak, who has been involved in this Russia investigation having to do with the former National Security Advisor, Mike Flynn, in our readout, it wasn't clear he was going to be in there. We only learned via a Russian news agency, because they posted these photos, that he was there. Why did the White House not make it public that the Russian ambassador was also going to be in that meeting?
Chuck, I don't know. You'd have to put that question to the White House staff and the protocol people. I can't really answer that. I don't know.
Is that something you knew the whole time, that he was going to be involved?
He was involved in the bilateral meeting that Foreign Minister Lavrov and I had, which was for about an hour and a half ahead of the meeting with the President in the Oval Office. But I don't recall whether I knew for certain who all they would be bringing to the Oval.
All right, I want to move on. I know there's a big trip, the President's first foreign trip to the Middle East. The President was pretty tough on all things Saudi Arabia in various interviews that I had with him during the campaign. At one point, candidate Donald Trump said it's ridiculous that the United States gives so much assistance to the Saudis, who wouldn't be there except for us. He even questioned how the Saudis treat women, how the Saudis treat gay people. Now he's going to go there, give a speech in Riyadh. Is he going to bring these issues up? Are you going to bring these issues up of human rights issues with Saudi Arabia and with their, shall we say, weak democratic reforms?
Well, Chuck, this is a very important trip that the President will be embarking on later in the week. I think, as you know, he's going to visit on the first half of the trip 3 countries, great centers that represent important religions in the world. The Muslim faith in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Judaism when he visits Israel, and Christianity when he visits the Pope in the Vatican. Mm-hmm. And I think the important aspect of this visit that the President is making is to bring a message of unity among all of these people of faith, among these great religions, that he strongly believes that it is the strength of the faith of people in these religions that will stand up and ultimately be victorious over these forces of terrorism, the terrible faces of violence that we see in ISIL, Daesh, and Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist organizations around the world. And so I think it is a very important trip on the President's part to call upon all people of faith in these religions to stand together for peace and stand up to this face of terrorism wherever it shows itself anywhere in the world. It's
my understanding that when he gives the speech in Saudi Arabia, he's essentially giving the audience is going to be Sunni Arabs, that the President is not going to be engaging with any Shias on the Shia side of this, of the Muslim world. Is it the intention of the President, of this administration, to essentially take sides in this, centuries-old war between Sunni and Shia?
No, Chuck, not at all. This is not about any particular religion. However, there is a strong element of the role that Iran, that the nation of Iran, plays in support of terrorism, in support of violent extremist expressions, and the disruptive and destabilizing actions of Iran in its hegemonic activities in the region. I think there is broad view and broad consensus among all in the region, among all Arab nations, among Israel and among others, of Iran's destabilizing activities in the region. So I think if I would make a distinction, it would be more that this has to do with standing up in unity against Iran as opposed to any particular religious overtone.
I want to give you a chance to respond to an op-ed that Senator John McCain wrote where he invoked your name, sir. He said this in a recent address to State Department employees. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said conditioning our foreign policy too heavily on values creates obstacles to advance our national interests. McCain goes on to write, with those words, Secretary Tillerson sent a message to oppressed people everywhere. Don't look to the United States for hope. Our values make us sympathetic to your plight, and when it's convenient, we might officially express that sympathy. So pretty tough words from Senator McCain. What do you say in response?
Well, first I'd say if anyone has earned the right to express their views, Senator McCain has, and I have great respect for the senator. I think the point that I was making, Chuck, in that message to State Department employees is an important one to understand, and that's that America's values of freedom, of treatment of people, human dignity, freedom of expression throughout the world, those are our values. Those are enduring values. They are a part of everything we do, and in fact they serve as the guidepost and they serve as the boundaries as we develop our foreign policy approaches and our diplomatic efforts. But I make a distinction between values and policy. A policy has to be tailored to the individual situation, to the country, to its circumstances, to the broader issues that we are addressing in terms of advancing our national security interest, our national economic interest. And so policies have to be adaptable. They have to change. They have to adjust to conditions, but our values can never change. Our values can never be put in a position of having to be compromised. And so the values guide our policy, but if we put our values in the front of our policies and say, this is our policy, we have no room to adapt to changing circumstances to achieve our ultimate objective. And I think if we are successful in achieving our ultimate diplomatic and national security objectives, we will create the conditions for the advancement of freedom in countries all over the world.
All right, I know you've got to go. Two more questions. The issue of moving the embassy, the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, it has been reported that it is not going to happen, and then that's been retracted. Let me ask you this. When is the final decision, or is this going to be one of those things that we're always going to contemplate moving it, but it's a moving target for a while?
Well, the President, I think rightly, has taken a very deliberative approach to understanding the issue itself, listening to input from all interested parties in the region, and understanding would such a move in the context of a peace initiative, what impact would such a move have? As you know, the President has recently expressed his view that he wants to put a lot of effort into seeing if we cannot advance a peace initiative between Israel and Palestine. And so I think in large measure the President is being very careful to understand how such a decision would impact a peace process.
So this could be a while, that if the peace process is active, he'll hold off on moving the embassy. That seems to be how I interpreted your answer. Is that a fair interpretation?
Well, I think it'll be informed again by the parties that are involved in those talks, and most certainly Israel's view on whether Israel views it as being helpful to a peace initiative or perhaps a distraction. And so I think the President, again, I think he's being very measured in how he goes about this, and appropriately so.
And finally, did the firing of FBI Director Comey shake your concern about how much independence the President will give you?
Not at all, Chuck. I have a great relationship with the President. I understand what his objectives are. When I'm not clear on what his objectives are, we talk about it. But I am devoted to helping the President achieve his objectives, helping him be successful. And I understand I have to earn his confidence every day with how I go about those affairs and how I go about conducting the State Department's activities consistent with the direction he wants to take the country.
What's the line between service to the President and service to the country, sir, for you?
Well, I will never compromise my own values, Chuck, and so that's my only line, and my values are those of the country.
Secretary Tillerson, I know you're busy and you got to get going. You got this big trip ahead of you. Thank you for spending some time with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chuck. And I want to wish all the mothers a happy Mother's Day, most particularly my own mother, my wife, and my two daughter-in-laws, the mothers of my grandchildren. Well, thank you, Chuck.
A great message to send. Thank you, sir. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.